Hello, this is Pastor Beth. Tonight's topic is hearing the trumpet sound. I started my evening off with prayer, and the night was clear and quiet, and fall was definitely in the air. As I began to talk with Abba Daddy, I asked him what to study out. Of course, he answered me, as he always does. He said to study out what I mean when you hear the trumpet sound. He reminded me that maybe, 10 or 12 years ago during a revival conference, that he called me by way of the trumpet sounding. At the time, I was attending a program with this church called the School of the Prophets. And I was learning and discerning how my gifting works and how to be a responsible steward of my gifting. In the midst of this training, I heard the trumpet call. In the midst, I recalled being in worship in the sanctuary amongst other believers, praising and worshiping, just absolutely praising the Lord. And then I heard the loudest trumpet I have ever heard. But it didn't sound like it was one trumpet. It sounded like an amphitheater just full of trumpets and shofars blasting. I felt the thunder of the sound vibrating my body. Even though the ceiling of the building was vibrating, I felt it through my whole body, right down to my feet. At first, I was frightened. And I ended up running out of the sanctuary to the hallway. And the trumpet call did not let up. It seemed even louder. And I recall falling to my knees, crying and repenting, and then praying and interceding. The prophet of the house at the time came up to me and supported me and lifted me up. And it wasn't until sometime later that I realized that I had received the call. In Exodus 19:16, it says in the Amplified, "The third morning there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people in the camp trembled." I guess you could say I was trembling, as well as when I heard the trumpets. It was so very loud. I recall covering my ears and screaming, "I can't make it stop." Then I heard these words, "You have been called." I was less mature then, as I hope to be now. So it took me a hot minute to put things together, even as long as a few days. In Numbers 10, verse 2 to 10, God had 2 trumpets made from silver. This is where the Lord instructed Moses how to use the 2 trumpets to call the congregations to assemble. Specific tones and blasts, length of the tones, all meant different things. Such as this: if both trumpets were blown, it meant all congregation was to meet at the door of the tent of meetings. If one blast was heard, It meant that the princes, leaders, heads of tribes of Israel shall gather themselves to Moses. One alarm blow meant the east side of the tabernacle would set out. If a second alarm blast sounded, the south side would be sent out. They had specific tones to signify gathering, alarms, wartime, rejoicing, feasts. At the month's beginning, there was a specific need for the sounding of the trumpets. This was my question to the Lord. What does it mean? And how am I called? What purpose does the Lord have for me to fulfill? I have first to understand the sound of the trumpet. So that brings me to Joshua 6:4. And this is a scene at Jericho. If you spent any time studying Joshua, we know that the trumpet sounded just before the walls of Jericho came down. Here the trumpets were 7 shofars made from ram's horn. Joshua was instructed to march around the walls of Jericho one time for 6 days. And on the 7th day, the 7 shofars were before the ark. And the 7 priests holding the 7 shofars were instructed to march around the walls 7 times and blow the trumpets, or the shofars. Here, God got specific with the type of sound he wanted from the shofar. They had to make a long blast, and you hear the sound of the trumpet. Then all the people shouted a great shout, and the wall fell. God produced just the right frequency with the combined shofar blast with the sound from the people. It must have been absolutely terrifying to witness the destructive force of sound. Psalms 98:6 says this: with trumpets and the sound of the horn, make a joyful noise before the King, the Lord. Because I see a conjunction here, I see that maybe multiple types of trumpets were used, some of silver and others of ram's horn. I keep asking God, what does hearing the trumpet call have to do with me? Isaiah 27:13 says this, and it's about stop me in my tracks. And it shall be in that day that the great trumpet will be blown, and they will come who were lost and ready to perish in the land of Assyria, and those who were driven out of the land of Egypt, and they will worship the Lord on the holy mountain in Jerusalem. 1 Corinthians 15:52. I look at this as a promise from God about what happens upon the last trumpet call. It says this: in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the sound of the last trumpet call, for a trumpet will sound, and the dead in Christ will be raised imperishable, free and immune from decay, and we shall be changed, transformed. Guys, this is huge. The trumpet sound comes before our transformation. That's exciting. And you can check out this confirmation in 1 Thessalonians 4:16. But let's not forget about Revelation 8, verse 6. Here, the 7 angels readied the 7 trumpets and prepared to sound them. Upon each of the soundings, it set off a new calamity on the earth, representing the 7 bowls of wrath. Some teaching are getting caught up on the kind of trumpet, and are they the same? These are tools God uses to create the vibrational sound frequency we need for the rapture. All throughout the scriptures, God uses trumpets to precede an event, a gathering, a tool in war, in conjunction with the vibration frequency of human sound production. Of course, for music, rejoicing and celebration, and again, all uses for a tool, a mighty symbol that precedes God's victory. In Psalms 47:51, God will ascend among shouts and the sound of a trumpet to rule and reign all the nations of the earth. So I want to bring this around full circle. I asked the Lord some questions about hearing the trumpet call. And after hearing the words, "You've been called," it took me a long time to realize what I'm supposed to do. It's not easy, and it wasn't an easy decision, but a necessary one that comes at a cost. I was listening to a Christian radio station today, and one of the editorials spoke about losing 1,500 pastors a month. Many suffer from depression, and they allow hurts to keep them from completing their calling. After all, we are people with feelings. We have hearts and minds and families too. We wear the same flesh suit. We're just like the person sitting right next to you. We're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I do believe that many like myself have been called, have heard the trumpet sound, and want to be found going about and doing and completing the Father's business. Please, as you are led, lift up your pastors and leadership of your churches. The call is a life changer. We have all been chosen to reconcile the lost to Christ. Some will pastor, some will prophesy, some will teach, some will evangelize, and some will be apostles. Don't just be a hearer of the word. Let's be doers of the word. In this lost world, we need to have hope. And I hope and pray that you have found some information in this message that is helpful. Please study the word yourself. Dig out these scriptures. Don't take my word for it. I pray this has really touched you. If you would like prayer, you can message me on Facebook at Pastor Beth at 121 Pastor Beth. And you can always message me as well. Thanks for watching. Over and out God's way. This is Pastor Beth.